Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Wrestling History. Hosts Ryan, Jacob, and this week we have something kind of fun. It's notable at the very least.
Definitely notable. I wouldn't go as far to say fun.
All right, we'll debate that in a few.
I lost 2 hours of my life watching this.
But only 2 hours.
I could have used those 2 hours to do many other more productive things.
All right. So, all right, before we get into our show, which this week is going to be WCW Greed from 2001, we'll let you know why that's important in just a minute or two here. Plugs?
Sure. Twitter, we're at WrestleHistPod.
Facebook, This Week in Wrestling History.
Google Play Music, iTunes, and Spotify.
This Week in Wrestling History. Subscribe, like, rate, review, I guess, whatever.
And YouTube.
Oh, yes, and we're on YouTube now. And send any feedback you got for us to wrestlinghistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Yep, and on YouTube, you got to make sure to search Wrestling This Week in Wrestling History Podcast.
And then look for the 80s logo, because that's us.
Yep.
All right, so yeah, this week, as I said a little bit earlier, we're going to be going over WCW Greed from 2001. This was their very first Greed, and it
Also
would be their
the
last.
very last Greed.
Speaking of last, the reason it's notable, this was the last ever WCW pay-per-view. The company would be bought by Vince McMahon 8 days after this pay-per-view.
Yeah. Because immediately after this, they have a Nitro.
Yeah, they have a Nitro the following night, and then the week after is
the last Nitro.
The last Nitro, which, spoiler alert, we're going to cover that next week.
We're going to cover that and the Raw that goes along with it.
Yeah, the simulcast. It was a very weird night in wrestling history, and I remember it pretty vividly, actually, so I'll maybe tell some stories from when that happened.
Okay, so starting off, overall, not an awful pay-per-view, but not a good one either.
No, it's definitely not good. There's so very similar to last week when we were doing WCW Uncensored from 1996, and it started off pretty strong and then kind of tapered off real fast. That's similar to what happened here. It started off with a couple good matches, couple all right matches, and then it didn't end as poorly as Uncensored did. It's just kind of just petered off into whatever.
Yeah, and that kind of seemed from probably around 1998 forward seemed to be WCW's kind
MO,
of
yeah.
Like starts off pretty good. Opening matches are great, and then by the time you get to the end of the show, you're like, I waited all this time for this.
Right. So I was actually listening to some stuff Tony Schiavone was saying a couple years back on his show, kind of regarding what was happening in the company at this time. So the employees knew that they were going under. They knew that this is it. We're done after this. So given that, it's actually pretty surprising how good of a show it was, considering everyone knew they were done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised more people, and actually certain people on the card, like, I don't know, Scott Steiner just seems like the kind of guy who would phone it in real quick at the end.
Right, but it wasn't, all things considered. I mean, you and I have both worked for companies before where we actually know that the place is closing and we just kind of have to run out the timer on things. It gets really, really bizarre, and people phone it in, and you see people kind of like leaving like rats off a sinking ship. But I never got that feel from this.
No, I mean, without knowing beforehand that this was the last WCW pay-per-view, I probably couldn't have told you that.
Right. It just seems kind of like a, whatever, WCW run-of-the-mill pay-per-view for this time.
Yeah, really the only way that you would have been able to tell that something was a little funny was the lack of people in the audience.
Right. So very early on, you will notice normally the entryway from where the wrestlers walk out, down the ramp, to the ring, normally that's a good 50 to 100 feet. Usually has somewhere between a dozen to 24 rows of seats that people are walking past.
Yeah, in this case, it was probably, 10 seat rows?
10 at best. I think it's more like 5. It's like 5.
Yeah. They have quite a bit blocked off,
it's
like at the sides. But the part that gets you to really notice it is when the wrestlers are doing things on the ring apron that's closest to the ramp. and you see the upper balcony of seats, and there's nobody up there.
No, so I think you looked it up. The arena held something like 10,000 people.
10,000. It was either 10,500 or 10,200, somewhere around
So
there.
slightly over 10 around 10 and a half.
Yeah,
There was maybe 4 to 5.
5,100.
5,100. So, right, less than half this arena is full.
And you can tell.
Right, you can tell very much, and no one was really paying for like the close seats. It was just whatever. So also the crowd. This is a constant thing. They were not into things at all.
They were dead.
And it gets really weird watching it because something that WCW was very famous for, piping in the crowd chants and crowd noise.
Tony Schiavone actually said, for sure, he goes, going back and watching this, it was not as loud as it was listening to it.
Right, yeah, he definitely mentions that they were piping in the crowd noise pretty hard, and that watching the show instead of being there, it's very noticeable that the sounds you're hearing are fake crowd noise that are being just looped over.
Yeah, because the noises are coming in at really awkward points.
Right, it's almost kind of constant instead of like normally how a crowd is a little bit kind of, there might be a low rumbling, but usually they're kind of like dead for a little bit and then we'll all peak at once and then crash. And
Well, like when certain wrestlers are talking, they're giving them the time to talk, and when the heels come out to talk, they start booing them and
right,
things like
yeah,
that.
there was no
But
sort
this,
of
it was like a constant fan in the background.
right. It was very pervasive and just kind of omnipresent and always just kind of hovering over the whole thing instead of being directed at, oh, a big move just happened, or oh, we're just kind of quiet during a transition of stuff. Yeah, it was always just kind of there.
So, what about this first match?
First match was a little bit weird. It was Kiwi versus Jason Jett.
I could not tell you what Kiwi's gimmick was. I mean, he had some goofy hair and some real baggy pink pants, but
Kiwi's gimmick was like the flamboyant. I mean, the gag is he gay or is he not gay?
so
And it's just kind of I mean, it's about done as tactfully as such a thing could have been done in 2000.
so a bad take on Val Venus kind of thing.
No, do you remember Rico from WWE?
Oh, okay.
Kind of more
Yeah.
like he's very flamboyant and just obnoxious, I guess, is the gimmick.
Yeah. Okay.
Metrosexual-ish, maybe, kind of. Just flamboyant, though. Just flamboyant.
That makes sense.
Jason Jett has a very weird distinction in the history books. He was on the very last ever ECW pay-per-view, and this, the very last ever WCW pay-per-view.
Sounds like Sean Carr.
The company killer?
When he wins belts, companies go under. You put this guy on a pay-per-view, you're done.
That's it. That's your last one. Yeah, so he was known in ECW as Easy Money. The guy's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, this match for two kind of random dudes was pretty solid.
I don't know if they build them as cruiserweights. If they were kind of right on the cusp of cruiser to heavyweight.
Yeah, Tony Schiavone mentions that it, like in the next match, the cruiserweight match that we just saw.
Right, so they never like bill it as this is a cruiserweight match. It's just kind of this new guy, Jason Jett. He's been doing kind of well. Kiwi's this guy that's been around for a little bit and has a little bit of interest to him.
Let's let Jason Jett do some flippy doos on Kiwi.
Yeah, so it's pretty athletic. Both guys move around the ring really well. There's some high flying stuff at spots. It's just a good little match. It's nothing. It's not like a Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles match, but it's a decent, solid little opener match.
I would say if anybody's watched any TNA, I would say that it was more of a 2008 X Division match.
Kind of just a standard meat and potatoes X Division match.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah. Like, it's not an offensive thing by any stretch of the means. It's a decent match, but it's not great. It's kind of surprising Jason Jett never really went anywhere because he seems like he could have. He seems like...
I think he probably just came in at a goofy time in
the business. Yeah, about to say, because meanwhile, over on WWE this time, we have Rock Austin feuding up towards Mania.
Yeah.
So you're really over there at a time when talking was much, much, much bigger than in-ring talent. And he wasn't the cream of the crop. He was a solid B+, maybe.
That was a little on the nose, don't you think?
Yeah, maybe. But he was decent, but not necessarily a standout. Maybe with some time he could have been, but I don't think he was quite as natural as some other guys, but not as bad as a lot of guys during this time were in the ring, honestly. But maybe he couldn't talk.
I mean, to be honest, again, if anybody's watched TNA, he would have been a probably one-time X Division champ and then faded off into nothing.
Yeah, come in, have his big build, get the title, and then kind of lose it in
40 days and be done.
Yeah, I could see that.
There was one spot that I really liked in this where Kiwi had his back up against the ring apron and Jet goes running at him. Kiwi does almost a I wouldn't even know what to really call that, where he throws him up over his shoulders like he's gonna flip him over his back.
Kind of like a back body drop?
Yeah.
Alabama Slam style kind of thing?
That's what it was. And as Jet goes up, he handstands onto the apron, bounces off of the ropes, and then does a DDT onto the floor on Kiwi. It was a solid little spot.
Yeah, so coming from ECW, he's going to have some more interesting type spots that most people probably haven't seen. So he gets some points for that.
Yeah, overall it was a...
Oh, yeah, Jason Jet's finisher was really interesting. The crash landing.
Oh, the suplex that he just kind of flips somebody in.
Yeah, so I guess I would call it a release suplex where he picks the guy up for like a normal vertical suplex, but then kind of keeps rotating the guy through it, but doesn't hold on. So he basically picks the guy up and lets the guy kind of powerbomb himself from out of a suplex.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was definitely different. You don't really see it today at all either, but it was kind of a cool looking move. So, all right, up next was some of the worst looking title belts ever for the...
I think the worst looking title belts ever.
For the inaugural WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team Championship. And this was the Filthy Animals, the team of Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio Jr., versus Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo.
So I sigh just because of Kid Romeo. But overall, the match was pretty solid.
Yeah, Kid Romeo definitely the weakest link of the whole thing, but even he wasn't awful. Again, it was a solid cruiserweight match like we came to expect from WCW in these days, from the TNA X Division.
Yeah, the one thing that I always laugh at is Rey Mysterio Jr. when he's not wearing his mask, coming out with like little devil horns stuck to his head.
He looks like a 14-year-old going out for Halloween.
Yeah. Like
unmasked Rey Mysterio is not a good look.
I would be a little bit more specific. A 14-year-old that's going out for Halloween that forgot a costume and just happened to have these little things laying around.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good look. Elix Skipper would go on to work in TNA.
Yep, where he
would do his big claim to fame from TNA was when he walked the cage.
Yeah, and I remember watching that. That was that was quite a feat.
Right. So Elix Skipper, very agile guy. He was a cruiserweight, but like just barely. He was a big cruiserweight if he in fact was actually a cruiserweight.
Yeah. He was closer to, because in TNA he ends up winning the tag team titles a couple of times.
He would have been an X Division guy because they didn't ever actually specifically put a weight division on that.
But he was more closer to Ron Killing's size.
Right.
Just a little bit.
R-Truth.
Yeah, just a little bit slimmer.
Right. A little bit taller maybe, but.
Yeah.
So Elix Skipper, very agile. One of the things he would normally do during a match is walk the ropes. So much like Undertaker would do old school and walk the top rope. But instead of like having to hold on to his opponent's hand for balance,
he would just walk it.
He would just walk. And sometimes he would walk like corner to corner to corner and do something, wouldn't he?
Yeah, there was. I remember one point in TNA he did that with the 6-sided ring. He made it to 5 out of the 6 corners.
Jeez. So when we're talking about when he walked the cage, he did this spot where someone was like perched sitting on top of the cage. And again, in TNA, they had the 6-sided ring, so they had a big 6-sided cage. He climbs up the cage, kind of boosts himself up so he's standing on the lip of the cage, not holding anything to support himself, runs out to the other corner of the cage where this other guy is perched and does a Hurricane Rana off the cage inside to the ring.
Yeah, it's quite the spot.
Yeah, it's a really... That spot alone is worth going and looking up. But anyways, I think highlight of the evening was during this match.
Time out before we get to that. This was the end of a cruiserweight tag team tournament.
Right.
As the graphic flashes and they're showing replays of the tournament, all of a sudden you see a relatively familiar name sitting on there. Freaking AJ Styles was in this tournament.
Right. So AJ Styles was in WCW in its last days from I think it was January 2001 to March 2001.
Yeah. And now it makes sense as to why Jeff Jarrett grabbed him so quickly when Impact started.
Oh, definitely. Jeff Jarrett can see talent. I don't know if he ever knows how to use talent, but he definitely has an eye for grabbing talent.
He might not know how to use it, and he might not know how to book matches, but
right.
Going back and looking at the original TNA roster, which shows up shortly after this because Vince so notably at the beginning of Monday Night Raw in 2 weeks says JEFF is going to be GONE.
GOONNEE gone.
Yeah. So they Impact essentially starts.
I think they start in like early 2002, so because obviously it takes them a little bit of time to kind of get everything together. But
yeah, I want to say they start like announcing stuff about it and start doing things with it as early as like August or September of 2001.
Very well could be. So,
but that original TNA roster was pretty packed.
Right. If you go back and look at it, it definitely had a lot of talent, and honestly, a lot of it's on SmackDown now.
Yeah, a good like 85% of it is on SmackDown.
Right. I mean, AJ, Joe, Bobby Roode. I don't know if he was the original part of it, but
I mean, he was early
still,
days.
Yeah.
R-Truth.
Yeah. So a lot of guys that went a lot of places kind of around this time. But anyways, as I was saying, I think this match had the highlight of the evening. It was Kidman hitting a shooting star press from the ring to the floor, but not off the turnbuckles. He actually just stood on the top rope itself, just kind of like climbed the ropes like a ladder and just hit it from the top rope to the floor.
Yeah. I mean, I always forget how good Billy Kidman was. I know I say I forget how good people were a lot, but it's because I don't go back and watch stuff that often.
Well, that's why we're here.
Right. So seeing Billy Kidman in his kind of prime is...
Yeah, Kidman had a bad habit for kind of botching stuff and not being terribly clean here and there, but I almost think that added a lot of
authenticity.
Right. To his match. It's like, it really looked like someone going out there and someone could get legitimately hurt, which no one typically did with Kidman except for the one time where he really hurt someone with the shooting star, because I'm pretty sure he's the reason the shooting star was banned in WWF for a long time.
You sure it wasn't because of Brock?
I'm sure it wasn't because of Brock. It was banned before then because I think Kidman botched one and landed on someone's like head or neck.
Oh, I remember that. Wasn't that on a Velocity or something weird like that?
Right, something like that. And then many years later, Paul London wanted to use it and had to go perform it like 20, 30, 40 times in a row.
They did the same thing with Evan Bourne when he showed up.
Maybe it was Paul London and then Evan Bourne using it. All I remember is it was either Kidman got it banned and Paul London got it unbanned, or Paul London got it banned and Evan Bourne got it unbanned. And the more I talk, the more I think it was Paul London got it banned and Evan Bourne got it unbanned.
Yeah, because I remember reading stuff about Evan Bourne having to do the shooting star press off of the top rope into the ring onto a crash mat 50 times in a row. He would have to hit, roll out, go up, hit, roll out,
and just
keep going with it. And after he did it 50 times perfect in a row, Vince was like, okay, you can use it.
Okay, that's probably what I was thinking of. I just know the move definitely was banned for a period of time.
Yeah, because Brock almost died.
I don't think that's why it was banned.
It should have been, because Brock almost died.
Well, then maybe you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, a man that big probably can't fly that quick.
It wasn't really necessary. But anywho, match overall, again, very good match. All the guys involved, really talented guys. So it was weird because Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo end up winning, where this whole thing seemed like it was perfectly set up for Kidman and Rey Mysterio to win, but okay.
Yeah, but then I guess they hit the gas pedal on the plans to eventually give Kidman and Rey the belts because,
Well, we'll get...
spoiler, something happens in 2 weeks.
Shocking. So, yeah, this is quite possibly the shortest lived like official belt I've ever seen. It has 8 days.
Yeah, first off, they looked atrocious.
They were not good looking belts. I don't think I was never a fan of any of WCW belts, but
I liked a lot of the WCW belts.
yeah.
Like, I'm a fan of the big gold belt. The U.S. title was okay.
Their U.S. title was really bland.
There wasn't really anything to say that it was U.S. except for the little red, white, and blue up at the very top.
Yeah.
But it was a decent belt. Tag belts were meh.
Yeah.
TV title was meh.
Exactly. Not really to write home.
But then and cruiserweight title is essentially the old cruiserweight title when it came back into WWE.
Yeah, something like that.
Very similar.
Very, very, very close.
But then they came out with these, and it's like, what the hell are those things? Like, it was a giant gold plate with a fat eagle on top of it.
Yeah.
And the straps themselves were ginormous. Like, Rey Mysterio had it at one point, like in a picture, holding it up, like after WCW closed, and it took up his entire set of abs.
It made it look like the big gold belt on Rey.
Yeah, but like,
except ugly.
But worse.
Yeah, so yeah, Primetime and Kid Romeo end up winning it. It was a good match. The feud obviously would last all of 8 more days, as every other feud in WCW would last 8 more days.
Right.
But so not really a notable title because, as we said, it was an 8-day run on that title, and it was held by 2 teams in 8 days, though. So I guess that's a thing.
I don't think I've ever heard of a belt disappearing any sooner.
Yeah, not that I can think of. So, all right, match number 3. This is where we start to we're getting a little shaky on the rails here.
All right, folks, we've already hit the high point of the night.
Pretty much. Next up was Shawn Stasiak with Stacy Keibler. So he was doing the Mecca of Manhood gimmick.
And she was, at this point, formally known as Miss Hancock.
Yeah. Defeated Bam Bam Bigelow in, sadly, what would be Bam Bam's last pay-per-view match.
Yeah, and Bam Bam was not in good shape.
No, this was not a good match at all. Shawn Stasiak, you may remember him from his days in the WWF as Meat.
Yeah, he was the guy we talked about at the Invasion pay-per-view a while back.
Yeah.
And he was the one that kept running after The Rock, and Rock would just kind of step out of frame, and he would just kind of run
into the wall.
Yeah.
Such a great gimmick.
Bam Bam was definitely not what he was from ECW.
No, from the mid-90s, from the early 80s even. Bam Bam was, I mean, he hit maybe 3 or 4 moves, and he was just a sad former shell of himself.
So do you remember when Big Show got super fat?
Yeah.
In like the WWE CW days? And he looked tired and unhealthy and just didn't look like he was doing good at all.
The saddest part was Bam Bam had the dead giveaway of this guy is not in good shape right now, wearing a T-shirt in the ring.
Yeah.
If you see someone wearing a T-shirt in the ring, it's usually not a good sign, especially if it's like week after week after week.
Yeah, it's never a good sign when something like that happens, but it was, like I said, the closest thing that I can liken it to was when Big Show got heavy, didn't look good, and then disappeared for a little bit to come back as super ripped.
So, nothing really to even talk about more here.
Nope.
Stacy Keibler? Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, that's the high point of this match.
That is easily the high point of this match. So, next was... no, there's still a few good matches after this one. This one was not a great tag team match, but it was okay. It was Team Canada, the team of Lance Storm and Mike Awesome, defeating Hugh Morris and Conan.
Which, on paper, Team Canada should be fantastic.
Right. Team Canada should be amazing. I'm a huge Lance Storm fan.
He's severely underrated.
And I always liked Mike Awesome back in his FMW and ECW days.
Yeah, and my first exposure to Mike Awesome was him versus Tanaka at One Night Stand.
Oh, jeez.
That was the first time I ever saw him. And he got booed out the building because of how he left.
Yep.
But then by the end of the match, because it was so good, everybody had to cheer him.
Yeah. So thankfully, Mike Awesome is now on Team Canada. He has left behind his awful That 70s Guy Mike Awesome gimmick that he was doing for a while in WCW. Why did this company go out of business again? I can't figure it out.
Yeah, it's beyond me.
We had Hugh Morris back to using the Hugh Morris name after having formerly been General Hugh G. Rection of the Misfits in Action. I hate WCW some days.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, this ends up being Bill DeMott.
Yeah, Bill DeMott, who would never go on to do anything except be a real asshole of a trainer, basically.
Well, except for now where he's an exec in Impact.
So he was basically known as his time for being a real asshole as a trainer in NXT.
Yep.
And Conan now...
Oh, wait. He was the mouthpiece and leader of Team Canada in Impact for a while. Proceed.
Okay, then. Yeah, and we had Conan firmly in kind of like his gangsta gimmick.
Yeah, this is when he's a cholo.
Yes, yes, thank you. That's exactly what he is. Wearing the wife beater and the
bandana.
Yeah, the bandana and just like the black pants.
And a flannel that's only buttoned with one button at the very top by his neck.
Yeah, just a good old-fashioned guy look. Traditional Mexican look? No, not at all. Not like our last pay-per-view where he had like the Lucha Libre gimmick still kind of going. So this match should have been better than it was. It wasn't garbage, but it wasn't great.
I mean, take Hugh Morris out of it, and you have three relatively good wrestlers in there.
People always talk about Bill DeMott being underrated.
He's not good.
No, I don't get that at all. He's okay. People are like, oh, he was a big guy that could do the moonsault like Bam Bam could. Okay, Bam Bam could work circles around Bill DeMott. I don't get it. Like Bam Bam during this time could almost work circles around Bill DeMott. He wasn't good.
Yeah,
he wasn't good. Ends up turning out, hey, this guy's a real dick in real life, and okay, whatever.
Shocking.
So, Team Canada ends up winning. It was fine.
I'm pretty sure wasn't this for like a number one contendership?
Yeah, it was for the number one contender for the tag team titles. So Team Canada, Lance Storm had gotten such a push in WCW when he first came in.
Didn't he have all three belts?
He did the belt collector gimmick where he was tagged. He was the tag champ,
TV and US champ.
He was the US champ, which he renamed to the Canadian belt. I don't remember if it was TV or hardcore. I think it was the hardcore title because he renamed it the Saskatchewan Hardcore International title. Get it?
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Get it? Because that's what he thought of that belt.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was also tag or maybe it was TV as well, and he unified some of the belts in there because around that time is when they ditched the TV title. So, anyways, I loved Team Canada. This was kind of when Team Canada was falling apart a little bit more here. This was kind of the tail end of it. I think Team Canada at this time was just Lance Storm and Mike Awesome.
It was the hardcore, the cruiserweight, and the U.S. title.
Lance Storm was not a cruiserweight.
Nope, considering he's billed at 231.
Right. So, yeah, he had a good 25 pounds over most cruiserweights.
Yeah. It wasn't even like it's not like a Mike Kanellis where Kanellis is probably at a 220 and he could pass as a cruiserweight.
Yeah, Lance Storm's not a small guy.
No, not at all.
He would have been small if he was wrestling in the 80s, but he wasn't small for 2001.
Not even close.
I think he's like 6'2", 6'3".
5'11".
Oh, all right. So he's a bit of a midget, but whatever.
He's not that tall.
Taller than you. Anyways.
No, he's... yeah, he is. He's got me by an inch.
There you go. All right. Anyways, so speaking of cruiserweights, up next we actually have the Cruiserweight Championship match.
Which I really like this match.
This was a really good match. So this was Chavo Guerrero Jr., the champion, defending the belt against Sugar Shane Helms.
I'm not a Hurricane fan, but I am a very big Shane Helms fan.
Sugar cane?
No. Especially because when I first started kind of really religiously watching WWE, it was at the point where he was the Cruiserweight champion and he was running through people with the Shining Wizard, which is my favorite move.
Right. So this was back when he's using the move that's pretty much banned from everywhere now.
The Vertebreaker.
Yeah, his finisher was the Vertebreaker. If you've never seen a Vertebreaker, it's really tough to describe, but it's kind of like power bombing someone, but off your back.
Think of an Alabama Slam, except instead of the person's stomach touching your back, their back is touching your back.
Or, you know what Drew Mack had been doing to Seth Rollins for a while, where he'd have Seth's legs over his shoulders and then flip him forward and smash him face first on the ground?
Yeah.
It's that, except instead of flipping him back over his shoulders, he just sat down.
Yeah, so whoever was on his back would just go neck first into the canvas.
Yeah.
Granted, Shane does it relatively well enough where when he goes to sit down, he lets go and pushes their shoulders out so that they end up falling flat on their back.
Right, that's why I said it kind of looks like a power bomb, and Chavo was really good at taking this very safely. The problem is, due to the way you normally hook the person's arms, if you don't unhook their arms or let them unhook their arms or give them enough like slack, you're literally just dropping them on their head with no protection.
Yeah, and I think the reason Chavo was so good at taking this is because he had to, when he was in Mexico, take the gory bomb relatively often.
Fair enough. So this was a really good match. Back and forth a lot, and finish was just really good finish. It was Shane was going up top for something. Chavo comes, stops him. Chavo actually hooks Shane up for the Vertebreaker. Shane's able to kind of like roll through but hold on to it, so it just kind of like flips them right over. So, yeah, when you're getting set up for the Vertebreaker, you're also kind of just able to reverse it straight into the same exact move.
Yeah.
It's got nice rotational symmetry.
Yeah. Shane almost kind of like walks forward and like catches himself and then picks Chavo up for it.
Right. So, really good match. Went about 14. So, all of the Cruiserweight matches got a lot of time on this. So
because they were good workers.
Honestly, let's see. They were the main event was up there in time, but otherwise we had the very first match was 12 minutes. The tag team match was just under 14 minutes, and this championship match just under 14 minutes as well. So main event went the longest, but only just.
I mean, it makes sense because, like I said, WCW at least knew that they were still the work rate company.
Right, and they let the workers have the time they needed to work.
Yeah.
So,
and if it meant kind of dropping down the main event a little bit, they would do it.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to touch on any of the awful promos that were happening throughout the course of the evening?
I think only just because of how headache-inducing it was.
So they were going with the shaky cam backstage where it looked like someone had a
home video
camera, was doing all the promos backstage. It was the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, I feel like we should probably hit on that group.
The Magnificent Seven was their giant heel stable, which would almost exactly become the Main Event Mafia in TNA much later. But, well, maybe not exactly, but...
3 out of the 7.
So the Magnificent Seven were Jarrett, Flair, who's also CEO, Buff Bagwell.
Hang on with Buff Bagwell. I don't know why this guy was pushed as much as he was in WCW.
I have no idea. He was one of their boys, but...
He was awful.
He was abysmal. Lex Luger,
who should have retired at least 10 years before this.
Rick Steiner,
should have retired.
Scott Steiner,
and
Road Warrior Animal.
Yeah, and at this point, Animal is just a guy in a t-shirt and jeans with face paint on.
So apparently, little background. Apparently, if you ever heard of the insurance company Lloyd's of London,
Yes.
they're that insurance company that will like insure all sorts of weird stuff for all sorts of money.
Yeah, like the most random things ever.
So apparently, Road Warrior Animal was able to get insured through these folks, and then had a claim that, I don't know what it was. He was apparently getting some sort of giant payout from these people, but basically said he couldn't work singles matches. He could only work tag team matches. So,
Okay.
because those were much safer and easier to do.
Isn't that what he was doing his entire career?
I don't know. Hawk wasn't around at this point. I don't know.
Anyway.
So, yeah, all throughout the night there was awful matches with them, and it was whatever.
The part that gets me is the shaky cam.
Yeah, the shake cam was bad. The promos themselves were awful.
Yeah, I mean, not even Ric Flair could bail out some of these ones.
Yeah, they were just bad. Yeah, anything with Jarrett and Flair was okay. Everything else was just bad.
I mean, those two could talk, but the promos that they had set up were so bad that even two really good talkers couldn't bail out the stuff that they were talking about.
Right. So let me say this is something I kind of noted about this kind of after the fact. At the very least, the one thing I can say about WCW during this time, Vince Russo was gone, as far as I'm aware, and most of the garbage that was his doing has kind of fallen to the wayside. And it was kind of feeling, it felt a lot more like pre-NWO WCW.
Yeah.
Without Hogan's awful taint to the whole thing.
I could see that. I got that same feel from it.
They didn't have a deep talent pool, but it felt like that's what they were trying to at least get back to. It felt like someone realized we need to kind of get back to our roots, and they were trying to. It was just too little talent, too late in the game.
Yeah, and you could definitely tell by the way that some of the promos were cut. They were pre-NWO promos.
Yeah, so they were trying to get back to those days. So, all right. Anyways, next matchup was for the WCW World Tag Team Championships. We had our champions, the Natural Born Thrillers, Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Haire.
Which, I mean, if you're going to put two guys together as a tag team, not the worst two.
Palumbo was, O'Haire was,
Palumbo got better when he came to WWE later on.
That's a sad. I never thought much of Chuck Palumbo.
Well, I should say he got better not during, like, because he came over with the Invasion, correct?
Yes.
It was after he disappeared and then came back in like with 2008.
It could have been that
2005, something like that.
Maybe a little. I remember the Billy and Chucky thing must have run its course pretty quick too.
No, it was actually after that because he ended up coming out as like he was essentially a knockoff American Badass Undertaker, but could move better than the Undertaker.
But he couldn't wrestle better than the Undertaker.
No, but with what he was doing, it wasn't awful.
So there was a bunch of them around this time. Originally they were called the New Blood in WCW. It was around 2000. They were a whole stable. It was Chuck Palumbo, Sean Stasiak, an annoying little mouthpiece guy, I forget who it was, Gingerak O'Haire. Because Gingerak and O'Haire were originally the tag team.
Yeah. And
then Palumbo and someone else were a tag team, and for some reason they ended up swapping partners. I don't remember why, but anyways, we're digressing here. They were facing the team of Totally Buff, which was the Total Package, Lex Luger, and Buff Bagwell. This was such a garbage match.
Well, I mean, if your high point is Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo,
so this match is 54 seconds long, but it's preceded by one of the worst promos ever. Lex Luger is not a good promo.
No.
Buff Bagwell is a worse one.
Yeah. And what makes it even worse above all of it is the piped in crowd noise.
Yeah, it's just awful. It's nonsensical. It's just bad on every. It's not even laughably bad. It's just what are these? What?
Yeah, I honestly don't know what their promo was about. I skipped through it until the match started and then watched a minute-long match of nothing.
Right. So this was Buff and Lex being pissy that they had to do the job to the young kids and weren't getting the titles. So they come from the old school of thought that if we get beat really quick, no one will remember that we got beat.
That's not a thing.
No, that's a dumb thing. And in fact, I typically remember those things more than I remember good, like a long, good, oh, it was a 20-minute match and this team lost. It was more, I remember the good 20 minutes and not the last 3 seconds of it.
Well, it's just like, think about it kind of modern times. Do you remember everything that happened in the Braun Strowman, Samoa Joe, Kane, and Brock Lesnar match? Or do you remember Braun Strowman tossing James Ellsworth around?
Right.
The guy got a freaking contract out of
these two
being tossed around by a giant man.
Right, exactly. I'm more likely to forget the pinfall, like the exact circumstances of the pinfall in a 20-minute match than I am in a 45-second match because, well, percentage-wise, 3 seconds is a bigger percentage of 45 seconds than it is of 20 minutes.
Right. And you also have to think that school of thought doesn't really work anymore, especially when you have along the same lines as that school of thought, JBL, who was always, well, I'm going to kick out just after 3 to make myself still look good.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's a little annoying sometimes, but I respect that a hell of a lot more than the 54-second pay-per-view match.
Yeah.
Well, the only upside is there wasn't that many people watching it live or on TV for it to get too upset by it.
True. I'm sure not many people remember that.
All right, so next was another not great match. It was Ernest the Cat Miller with Miss Jones defeating Canyon, who had put Miss Jones on the shelf shortly beforehand.
I skipped to this match.
So did I. It wasn't good.
Okay, so moving on.
Yeah, Canyon was like, he felt like he could have been something, but always just lacked something.
He looked like Al Snow the first time he came out.
Yeah, he did. He was really good in the ring-ish, but he wasn't a good promo and just never really connected with him.
I could see that. When he came out, he seemed very stale. He seemed like the knockoff stale version of DDP.
And that's kind of exactly what he was. So. All right, up next we have the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship match. We got our champion, Rick Steiner, versus Booker T.
Not a great match, but not terrible either.
I've never been a Rick Steiner fan. Steiner, 5-10 years outside of his prime, definitely not a fan.
I mean, he was okay when they were tagging in like the early 90s.
Right.
And they were doing the actual wrestler gimmick.
Right. So when his gimmick was just kind of I'm a bit of a doofy guy, but I'm a really good collegiate wrestler. Okay, you're fine.
Sounds like somebody we know.
Yeah. And now he's doing the gimmick of, I'm Scott Steiner's brother.
And I bark at the crowd.
Did he even do that?
He did it once, and then Shivani was like, oh yeah, he doesn't even have to bark the 3 times anymore. The crowd does it for him.
He was not good at this point in time.
Because he was the dog-faced gremlin.
Yeah.
It was easily the worst nickname I've ever heard in all of professional wrestling.
It's up there. So Booker T wins, I think this was actually his first time holding the U.S. Championship.
Yep.
So Booker T gets his first U.S. Championship win. That's kind of cool.
For 8 days.
But he would go on to unify the U.S. and world titles.
No, don't they use the U.S. title in WCW or in WWE for a little
bit? But
bit?
he technically held both belts at the same time at the end of WCW.
Yeah, and Booker T easily carried this match. Like
clearly.
He he sold. The one thing that I noticed in this, which I had seen with Scott in TNA, the Steiner brothers don't sell.
No, they very much came from the Legion of Doom school of thought on that, of the we're bigger than you, we're not selling for you.
And you could tell at points where Booker T would hit a move and Scott or Rick would just kind of like take it like it was a punch and then stand back up immediately. Like even when, am I allowed to say the name of Booker T's scissor kick during this time?
Sure.
When Booker T hits the ghetto blaster, Scott Steiner or Rick Steiner hits the ground and then immediately stands back up as Booker T is doing the spin-a-rooney.
Right. So I think we've talked before about how Undertaker used to kind of make people work for it. This wasn't even making people work for it. This was refusing to do anything with it.
Yeah, they just wouldn't do it.
Yeah. It's a shitty way to do business.
Yeah, because at least Taker, if he respected you enough or you were putting on a good match or actually laying your punches into him, he would be like, okay, I'll do the
right.
sell.
And it made sense because, okay, now it's making it look good and it's making the product is better for it.
When it's done correctly.
Right, exactly. And I'm saying as opposed to just their crappy no selling. That doesn't.
And it was surprisingly bad in this. And it would be just as bad for the main event.
Yep. So, our second to last match here apparently became somehow over the course of the night a kiss my ass match.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I think it was just because Dusty was eating burritos all night.
Which was super gross. It was gross.
How many did he eat?
Like 40? 30, 40, they said.
And my favorite part was the joke of Shivani saying, well, maybe they're high shelf burritos. And who was the other commentator?
Scott Hudson.
Sidebar on that. Scott Hudson sounds very similar to Don Callis.
He kind of does.
I had to go and look it up because it threw me off for a second.
It wasn't a bad announced team, but it was very weird because they were both faces.
Yeah, and
there was no heel announcer, and they were both almost more play-by-play guys.
Yeah,
they were doubled up on the same role, so it just felt weird having two of them there. The booth just felt weird.
But Shivani's
better than Don West.
Fair point. Better than Mike Tenay and Don West in TNA.
There's no way I could watch TNA from that because of that announced team alone. I would run out of a room and light myself on fire before I want to listen to Mike Tenay and Don West.
So think about that. That was TNA's commentary team for like 8 years.
Fuck no. That's ridiculously awful. Mike Tenay was just annoying and blech.
But then you had Don West, who everything he said sounded like Billy Fusillo.
Because I'm going to sell you this Gem Mint 10 baseball rookie card.
And it was even worse when he would then go to talk about the like T-shirts and stuff. Because he was always the guy that was selling the stuff for TNA.
The guy just makes you feel like greasy.
He made me feel like I just talked to a really scummy car salesman.
Yeah, he essentially had to have been. If you tried to tell me that Don West has never sold cars in his life, I will call you a liar. I would not believe that.
So
anyways, back to the match.
Going back to the top shelf burritos, and they go kind of back and forth about, is there really such thing as a top shelf burrito, or is it just all B shelf burritos? I got a chuckle out of it.
Yeah, clearly at certain points in this evening, they were entertaining themselves because they knew what the future of the company was. I
think at one point, the two of them just had to have taken their papers and tossed them over their shoulder and been like, well, guess we're fucking doing this live.
If they had any to begin with, I would assume there could have not even been that much production working on things. But
yeah.
So anyways, we have a tag team kiss my ass match, apparently, between Dustin and Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett.
And I will 100% say it again. Dustin Rhodes, severely underrated.
So I have a couple things to say about the attire of people in this match before we get started. So Ric Flair comes down wearing a Hawaiian shirt and pants because he says he doesn't even need to be involved in this match. The chosen one, Jeff Jarrett, has this handled.
Yeah, he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt and khaki pants.
Yeah, so he ends up getting chucked into the ring anyways, and he's part of the match. And then there's Dustin Rhodes' getup.
I mean, isn't that what he was wearing when he was the Natural?
No, he was wearing kind of a cowboy shirt and jeans. This was the cowboy shirt to end all cowboy shirts. It didn't have buttons. It had belt buckles. His shirt had 17 buckles on it. They were these giant gaudy. I think there were metal buttons on it.
I mean, if you're going for it,
he went for it. It was a ridiculous shirt. I don't know what this shirt was, and I'm pretty sure his pants also had belt buckles all down the side of it. I was like, I don't get it. Okay, you're a cowboy, I guess. Yay.
Well, I mean, he's Dusty's son. He's
the grandson of a plumber. You're not a cowboy.
If you're gonna send it, you might as well send it.
I'm glad Dustin is a much better worker than he is at dressing himself. Oh, so it was just completely ridiculous, this outfit he's wearing. Anyways, the parts where it's Jarrett and Dustin are fine. The parts where Flair and Dusty get involved go downhill. The crowd loved it, but
it was because Dusty should not have been wrestling.
No, he shouldn't have. The interesting thing to note, this was the only pay-per-view match where Flair and Dusty ever faced each other.
Yeah, when they said that, on commentary, I didn't believe them. I had to go and look it up.
It's because their previous matches were from so long ago, it predated pay-per-view.
Yeah, because I'm almost positive that their last match before this was in 85.
Right. So it were a while ago.
Yeah.
The crowd was absolutely into Dusty and everything he was doing.
Of course, because how could you hate that guy?
Right. So the match itself was not a technical marvel by any sort of the means, but as far as getting the crowd into the match, this was the only time in the entire evening the crowd really came alive.
Yeah, and I mean, Dustin carried the match. Clearly.
Oh, yeah.
Dustin and Jeff carried the match.
Did Dusty ever take any sort of offensive move from anyone?
Just punches.
Maybe a couple chops from Flair?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a few strikes, so nothing significant. All right. Our final match of the evening was a Falls Count Anywhere match for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Our challenger, Diamond Dallas Page, versus our champion, Scott Steiner.
He's not my champion.
Sure as hell weren't mine.
And
Big Papa Pump, you weren't a freak? You weren't going to holler if he's your hookup?
No. I hated him in WCW. I hated him in TNA. I hated him in WWF.
A friend of mine absolutely loved this gimmick of his, and I feel like we should drag him onto the show and defend that stance sometime.
That could be fun. Get a list of gimmicks and here, what do you think of these?
Yeah, find some old school wrestling fans. What'd you think of this?
Now defend it.
Yeah. I remember you liking this. Why? That would be amazing.
So,
all right. So everyone look forward to a show in a couple weeks. You know what's coming.
So
send us bad gimmicks.
Here was my thing with it. We have a Falls Count Anywhere match. To me, a Falls Count Anywhere match does not actually count as a Falls Count Anywhere match if they don't go backstage at some point.
Right. That's really the point of this whole thing is if you're just going outside of the ring a little bit and up the ramp.
Right. You didn't. I think they went into the crowd, once and came back real quick?
Oh, was this the one where they had the awful staged. Oh, so, speaking of Paul London, the guy that had his crutches stolen?
Yes.
That was Paul London.
I forgot about that. Yeah, they had the staged fan.
Where he was sitting off in the middle of nowhere, clearly not a plant.
And
gets his crutch stolen and then hands his other crutch to DDP later and then is just kind of standing there cheering him on yeah, that's all right. I can stand without two crutches.
Yeah, it was something. But they went into the crowd once and came back. They never went backstage. They never went behind or over by the announce tables.
Nope.
They went up the ramp once.
About to say, I don't think anyone went through a table, did they?
Nope.
Yeah, it was a no count out match, I suppose. Didn't the finish actually happen in the ring itself too?
Yeah, which to me, a Falls Count Anywhere match normally means no DQs, right?
Right.
To me, that would also mean probably no submissions.
No, you could do submissions in it, like, because we've seen that where someone gets put in a submission hold, like on a weird piece of equipment or something. Like,
Okay.
like, oh, so he got put in the walls of Jericho, like while he's caught in like a security barrier or something.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense then.
It makes sense. That doesn't offend me too much.
It just. The Steiner recliner was awful.
Yeah, the Steiner recliner was super awful as a finisher. It's the camel clutch.
I mean, at least.
Rusev makes it look brutal.
Yeah, because when he does it, he actually sits down on their back.
Yeah. Steiner made it look like it was an inconvenience for his knees to try to put this thing on.
Yeah, that should have been Scott Steiner's actual nickname and not Big Papa Pump. He should have been Captain Inconvenience.
That would have been a great gimmick for him. So Scott Steiner wins when DDP passes out from blood loss while in the Steiner recliner, or just passes out in the Steiner recliner.
Yeah, he just passes out, and he puts them in the Steiner recliner once. They do the thing where ref picks his hand up two times. It falls limp. He goes to pick it up the third time, and DDP's both hands come up and grab the ropes.
Ugh.
He blades. Then Steiner, has a couple extra moves in there. Puts him in the Steiner recliner again as he's bleeding like a stuffed pig.
And just gets the
Ref-
drop of the hand 3 times. The ref just calls off the match.
They don't even do the
Oh, they
drop of
just-
the hand. The ref looks at DDP, taps him on the shoulder once, sees how much blood is coming out, and then calls for the bell.
The lack of internal consistency there is super annoying.
What makes it even better is that he doesn't even look towards the What am I thinking of?
Timekeeper?
Yes, he doesn't even look towards the timekeeper. He just off towards the corner of the ring says to call for it.
Ring the bell, ring the bell. Yeah. So that's WCW Greed, their last ever pay-per-view. Like we said, it's not the most offensive thing, but it's bland at best.
If I never saw this pay-per-view, I probably wouldn't have missed out on anything.
Right. And that's almost more offensive to me than it being a bad pay-per-view.
Right.
Is that it was just boring and bland and okay, I guess. And again, like we said, a fair number of the guys there did show up to have their matches, even though they know the company was going under. But
yeah, they didn't phone it in at any point, and they actually gave it a good go.
Right. They didn't phone it in, but the guys that were there weren't exactly the best ever in the world. So.
Right.
Like, Sting wasn't even on this.
No, they make mention in 2 weeks when they do the last Nitro that they hadn't seen Sting since November or something. I think they were gearing up for another departure. Sting comes back and is standing in the rafters thing.
I had heard that there was a rumor after the thing in 2000 where Hogan had left in a huff and everything, and Goldberg was also gone at this time, and Sting was kind of gone at this time.
All still under contract?
Right. I heard there was a rumor that they may have tried to do another invasion thing, but instead of an NWO invasion, it was kind of like a Millionaires Club / Main Event Mafia / old school guys, but as faces trying to actually just start no, we're not
we don't have time for you young guys.
Not even that. It's just that you're not doing business properly. We care about the old school.
Yeah, okay.
So is good guys, which would have been great for the WCW loyalists. So
yeah. But yeah, Sting hasn't been around since I believe they said September or November, something like that.
So, all right. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap things up here?
On this? No.
Yeah. Let's say, do we have any time to go over Fastlane? Yeah, not really. Any maybe we can touch on that next week when we start getting closer to Mania.
Yeah, why don't we the podcast before Mania
we'll kind of recap where we are.
Do a lead up to Mania.
Sounds good. So there's your little bit of producing on air. So yeah, next week we know what we're going to do. We're going to actually cover the final episode of WCW Nitro ever.
And we're going to talk about the Monday Night Raw that was simulcasted with
Right. So that kind of very interesting time in pro wrestling history. So, all right. Anything else?
Nah, I'm good.
All right. We're history.